Hi, let me tell you what I'm working on here. This is a 1938 RCA 810K radio chassis, and I have it out of the radio, and there is no power applied to this radio. The power is totally off. And let me tell you what I've been doing here. This is a 10 tube radio, and that's including the tuning I tube, which is really cool. This will spread a green indicator around like an iris of an eye, and it indicates your signal strength and if you're tuned at the peak of the tuning, and that's a really cool thing. So let me show you what I've been doing here. What I've been doing, like if you get an antique radio, you really don't want to immediately plug it in or anything, because there could be shorted wiring, or more likely the electrolytic capacitors. They look like this. They could be shorted out. Um, Let me show you what the original one looks like. The original electrolytic looks like these metal cans, aluminum cans, and these have the electrolyte inside with that are wrapped up like a big foil capacitor, but the electrolyte, it like dries out, and these things go bad. So if they get shorted out inside, then you could really damage this part here, which is a very expensive power transformer. You don't want to do that. So the best thing to do is, if you get an antique radio, don't plug it in initially. Um, the electrolytics will more than likely have to be replaced. So let me turn this back up again, and I'll try to go fast because I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but I want to try to cover a lot of stuff. And so what I did was I replaced all of these capacitors. All the paper capacitors have been replaced. And when I checked all of them were bad. All of them were leaking, and they were shorting out inside. So the radio would not have worked with these capacitors in. So I replaced those, and they look like this. I put them in a bag, and they're different. Mostly they're tubular, and I replaced a couple of the mica capacitors. Usually you don't have to replace those. And all these RCA's, they kind of look like these black lozenge-shaped capacitors. I did a couple of those, but generally you don't have to replace these. Now, let me talk about wiring real quickly. These wires are twisted together from the factory, and what you want to do is, don't go like replacing a lot of wiring in a radio, because sometimes wiring is very critical to the circuit. In this case, these wires are twisted together, and they provide a sort of capacitance to the oscillator coil. So what I did was, to prevent them from really deteriorating fully and all the insulation cracking off, I coated them with clear silicone, clear General Electric silicone, and I think that's going to do the trick for that. Other wiring down here, the insulation was like getting pretty brittle, so I used something called uh, Super Corona Dope. And this stuff here, you could brush it on the wires, and it has a dielectric strength of about 4,000 volts. So I put about 2 coatings on the wires, and on these wires here, and the 4,000 volts should be adequately to protect from any shorting against the chassis. Some of these are closer, but I coated the wires completely, and that should do the trick. One other mod I done was I installed a inline fuse, to the AC power, and I put a 1 amp fuse in there, and that's probably about right, maybe 1 amp or 1 1/4. And I really don't know exactly what it should be, but I think 1 amp should do it. 1 amp fuse is better than no fuse at all, which radio had no fuse at all. And another little modification I had done, which I had to do, was I put in this toggle switch in the back. I used a existing hole that was in the radio already, And I did that because the switch here, this is a combination on-off switch and tone control. And you really can't get these anymore. So the on-off switch portion was just totally gone. So I had to put another on-off switch on here. So I figured I'd just reach around the back of the radio when I put it in the chat into the cabinet and just turn it on and off like here. Another important tip, that not that I'm an expert or anything about this, but I had this brilliant idea to take digital photos of all the original circuitry, before I even touched the radio. And I took pictures of everything, and this will show whether if I made a mistake or not when I'm putting a new part in. And this was really, really helpful because I don't have like the greatest vision anymore. And I put like 2 sets of glasses on so I could work on this. And after I do all that, I take a magnifying glass, and then I use this to analyze like the solder joints I make, and they should be nice and smooth and shiny. And if they aren't, I just reheat the part again. You reheat the part, and then flow the solder onto the parts after they're heated. And then let me tell you another couple tips I have. I'll put this back down. This here is a vacuum tube volt ohmmeter, and this has a higher impedance that you can use to accurately measure voltage on the tubes. So I think this is like a really good thing to have, because this is what they used back in the day. So it's actually powered up. You plug it in the wall, and the high impedance of the vacuum tube inside kind of matches the high impedance of the tube. So you get a better accurate DC voltage or AC voltage reading, theoretically, I guess. And then here, this is a soldering station. So I temperature controlled soldering station. So I just set that for 800 degrees, and it heats up very quickly, and it keeps accurate temperature. And I think that's an essential to have. And this here is an isolation transformer. You should use an isolation transformer because this will isolate the chassis from the house ground. And that's essential really to have in case if you want to use an oscilloscope. You should isolate the chassis from your mains, from your house mains. So it's just a really good practice to do. And this here is a variac. After you get your soldering all done and everything checked, and you want to power things up, you can bring up the voltage very slowly with this variac, and then you could listen in case there's any problems or any unusual smoke or heating, and then you could turn it back down real quick. But in my case, I was lucky and everything worked okay, and I just ramped it up real slow. I got up to 100%. And then the other thing that we could have that's very useful is this. This really helped me out, but I made this frame around my workbench, and I put in halogen track lights that I picked up at a tag sale, and I could really turn up the brightness really good. And these things adjust, so I could adjust the light, like I demonstrate here. You could angle the light exactly where you want it, and this extra light is really, really good for someone like me who really can't see as well as I used to. And then it just really is fantastic. It really was a good thing that the guy had that at the tag sale. I was able to use this light to great usefulness here. And that's it. The next video, I'll show you the radio powered up, and hopefully these tips really help. And just remember, if you get an old antique radio, don't plug it in initially. Replace the electrolytics and make sure the wiring's okay. And learn as much as you can about it. Thank you very much. Bye.